Friends, in the kingdom of God, you can add no more joy to your life than you already have by playing it safe. There is no more joy for you in the kingdom of God by playing it safe. God does not call us to play it safe. How many people here have been a person of faith all of your life? You know God did not call you to play it safe. Now, God didn't call you to take irrational risks and do things that are harmful to you or others, but God did not call you to play it safe. You can add no more joy to your life. You can experience no more freedom by the Spirit in Jesus Christ by steering away from opportunities to serve God with joy and with love and with grace. No more joy if we're going to play it safe. When I was a kid, my dad's best friend was a Roman Catholic priest, a Monsignor, actually. And I didn't really know what that meant, so I had to look it up. But apparently a Monsignor is a priest who gets kind of a papal blessing, and so it's somehow spiritually elevated. I didn't know that. To me, he was just Father Jack. And Father Jack looked like Ming the Merciless. If you ever watched any of the old Flash Gordon movies or shows or read the comic books or saw the 1980s when they remade Flash Gordon and the most awesome band ever, Queen, did the soundtrack for it. And Jack looked like Ming the Merciless. He was really tall, big guy, fully bald, shaved his head, and he had a goatee. And he could play it up. He could furrow his brow and talk down to you and kind of scare you into faith if he wanted to. But Jack wasn't like that. Jack did not ever play it safe. Jack was a person of joy. He always came with this huge ear-to-ear smile on his face. He had a basketball belly. I don't know where that came from. Maybe by having, as a priest, a housekeeper who fed him well. I don't know. But when he laughed, that basketball belly would bounce up and down. And I remember Father Jack saying to me one day, "Mark, you know what scares me?" And I said, "What's that, Jack?" He said, "What scares me is that I'm going to die and I'm going to go to heaven. I'm going to stand before the throne of God, judgment seat, and God's going to say to me, 'Jack, celibate?' Celibate? Jack, I didn't say celibate. I said celebrate." I don't know how he did being celibate. That's not an easy thing, I imagine, for a person. But Jack held back nothing when it came to celebrating the goodness and the grace of God. He lived in the freedom, and his joy was contagious. I can easily say to you, he's one of the reasons I went into ministry, because he knew how to make it fun, so to speak. Well, here we are on this day, ready to launch into a new chapter in our almost 90-year history of loving and serving Jesus Christ here at the Montgomery Presbyterian Church. And I want to share a story with you, a story I hope you remember, because I've told it to you at least twice in the last 6 years. But it's the sort of story I probably should be telling every year, or maybe every month. I don't know. It's Fred Craddock's 9-pound crow story. Do you remember Fred's story of the 9-pound crow? Fred was this really fantastic preacher. Fred was named one of the top 20 preachers of the 20th century. He was good, and he was a storyteller. Fred was bivocational, though. He also was a professor at Candler School of Theology. So he was often between the church and the school, and he'd lock himself away sometimes in his study at home to write his sermons and write his lectures. And one day, as old Freddie's sitting there at his desk working on a sermon, he looks out the window to think for a moment about what he needs to write next. And as he's looking out the window, you know what he saw? There you go. Some of you remember. He saw a 9-pound crow. And that 9-pound crow is just walking down the street, hum-de-day. And that crow walked the whole length of the street. And Fred's watching this funny-looking big old bird walking the street, gets to the end of the street, and that crow turned right, went down another street. Well, Fred must have been working hard on that sermon, because the end of the day came, and guess what? He saw coming back down that road 9-pound crow. You got it. You see how this goes. Second day, same thing happens. Fred's working on that sermon or that lecture, and he looks out the window, and there he sees that 9-pound crow walking down the street again, just lumbering away, just taking his time. Gets to the end of the street, turns right. End of the day, that 9-pound crow comes lumbering back down the street. Third day, Fred can't take this anymore. He's like, this is strange. This bird's just walking down my street. So Fred gets out of his seat and he goes to the front door and he hollers out to the crow, "Crow, what you doing?" And that crow looked at him like Fred couldn't see. He said, "I'm walking down the street." He says, "Yeah, but why aren't you flying down the street?" And the crow said, "Fly?" And Fred said, "Yeah, you're a crow. Why aren't you flying?" And the crow said, "I couldn't fly. I'm afraid to fly." He said, "What do you mean, afraid to fly? You're a crow." And he says, "Yeah, but I could get hurt. Things might not work out so well for me, so I'm walking." And so that crow continued to walk down the street. And as he walked away, Fred's eyes followed after him, and he shouted out, "Hey, crow, by the way, what's your name?" And the crow turned around, looked around at him, and he said, "Around these parts, they call me Church." Oh, some say with disappointment. You know, we're getting ready to take flight today. We got so many good things happening now, a lot of things down in the pipeline, things that we're getting ready to launch, not just this new brand and this new logo and all that new website stuff. We've got new programming and new people to reach, and our congregation's growing, and we want to see more of that. But it seems to me on a day like that, remembering Fred Craddock's 9-pound crow story could speak to us about our own fear, anxiousness about change, trouble about things that don't appear the same to us. And it may serve as a word of caution to us to not let our fear get the better of us. After all, God never told us to travel in fear, did God? Absolutely not. God told us to travel how? By faith. God calls us not to follow with fear or trepidation, but to follow with trust and by faith. To trust God and trust God at work in the lives of others. I shared with you the book of Hebrews today, some of the book of Hebrews. And I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but apparently whoever wrote it was working with a congregation almost 2,000 years ago that was struggling to live their lives by faith and not by fear. That's the way it works for us sometimes. Somewhere along the way, our fear presents itself in different ways. Sometimes it shows up as a need to do it right. We need to follow the rules or else. Because that's what faith is to some people, but it's not according to the Bible. And so many people broke the rules to live their lives by faith. Sometimes our fear shows up as a desire for perfection. Guess what? Jesus never asked for perfection. He asked for faithfulness. And so the author of the book of Hebrews wants to remind us that there's all sorts of people of faith who went before us, and we are in a long line with them. And so he creates this great list in chapter 11. Like I said, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I want to share some of them with you because they're so exciting to me. He starts by saying, by faith, Abraham, when put to the test, offered up Isaac. He who had received promises was ready to offer up his only son. God took care of that. He spared Isaac. That was not to be worried. By faith, Jacob, when dying, blessed each of his sons of Joseph, bowing in worship over the top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, at the end of his life, made mention of the exodus of the Israelites and gave instructions about his burial. By faith, Moses was hidden by his parents for 3 months after his birth because they saw that the child was beautiful and that they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to share ill treatment with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. By faith, Moses left Egypt, unafraid of the king's anger. By faith, he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood. By faith, the people passed through the Red Sea. By the faith, the walls of Jericho fell. Do you remember the story of Joshua and the Battle of Jericho, that was one of my favorites as a kid. And we had a song. Do you remember the song? Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho. Yeah, you know it. By faith. By faith he did that. By faith, Rahab, the prostitute, did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had received spies in peace. Think about that, what it means to receive spies. Because your Christian faith asked for it, even though your secular leadership may not want you to do that. Don't tell me faith is about following the rules. We come from a long line of people who trusted God, willing to put their life on the line. And what more should I say, for time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who by faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched raging fires, escaped the edge of the sword, won strength out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. Women received dead by resurrection. Others were tortured, refusing to accept release in order to obtain a better resurrection. With God, to travel by faith means to keep our sights set on the kingdom above and not on earthly powers below. And on I could go until finally the author of Hebrews says, so let us lay aside every weight and every sin. And he's talking about our fear. Lay aside your fear. Lay aside your sin. Lay aside those distractions that keep you away from serving God, that keep you away from the people of God. Lay that stuff aside. Lay it aside, for we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. And let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the sake of the joy that was set before him endured the cross. His joy was in something way bigger than obedience to the world, but obedience to God. Disregarding the cross's shame, he's taken his seat at the right hand of God, the throne of God. That's kind of deep, kind of heavy. But you know what? If we don't get that, we don't get faith. If we don't get that, we're just coming to Country Club Christian Church, and that's not what it's about. You know, there's a church, a Christian Church Disciples of Christ once asked me if I might be interested in applying to be their pastor years ago. You know what that name of that church was? Country Club Christian Church. And I thought, I don't know if I can go there. But they were good and faithful people, just like all of you are. And that's our daily work, is to set aside our fear, our anxiety, set aside those things and to live our lives by faith. Beth was leading a Bible study on this passage this past week. I've been working on a sermon, and we were talking about how we could easily continue the book of Hebrews list by naming people in this church who by faith overcame great challenges and loved Christ and served Christ's people through this church. I was thinking that in almost 25 years ago, I think it was 22 years ago, by faith, this church willingly called me to be their pastor. I was thinking, what's wrong with these people? Don't they know who I am? I felt like I was tainted goods at the time, but by faith, they reached out. By faith, they did that. I was thinking about how almost 22, maybe it was more than 22 years ago now, when I first came here, Lanier Floyd came by the church one day, and he said, Pastor, you got to meet some people. I said, well, I met a lot of people, son. He said, no, you got to meet some people. I'm going to take you around house to house to some of the folks who don't normally come to church. And some of them were, very gracious, welcoming people, and Lanier did a great job building the bridge for me by faith. And then he took me to some folks, I don't even remember who they were, but it was deep woods, it was deep south kind of people. But, by faith, he wanted them to meet their new ear-ringed pastor, and by faith he had courage to stand by my side and be an advocate for the new pastor. I was thinking about Nancy Stevens, who loved everyone in this congregation. She loved me so much she called herself my Savannah Mama. She said, you got your mama up in Canada, I'm your Savannah Mama. And I was thinking about how by faith, Miss Nancy was one of the very first people to welcome a same-sex couple in this congregation, even though she struggled with it. Nancy was not necessarily at home with it, and by faith, she willingly came and talked to me about it. And remember the day she came in, she said, Mark, these two people signed the visitor pad, and I sent them a letter last week, and they came again this week, and I'm going to send them another letter. But I noticed that these two women, have the same address. And I said, oh, well, that's Deb and Kelly. They teach here in Savannah, and Beth knew them through teaching, and we invited them to come to church. And they've got a little girl who came, you remember, was baptized here. Mackenzie was baptized here. And I said, they live together. And Miss Nancy said, oh. And then without skipping a beat, she said, oh. And she said, Dr. Mark, I have to be straight up with you. She said, I don't understand that. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And she said, I'm still going to welcome them. That's what radical hospitality is. It's to welcome people you might not understand, but you still welcome them in Christian love, right? And I said to Nancy at the time, well, Miss Nancy, first of all, to be honest with you, I'm not sure I can fully say I understand. You know, this is kind of new to me too, and I'm growing and I'm learning. And like you, I want to welcome people in Christian love. But I said, as important to me is that you talk to me about it. That you came and talked. That's a very faithful thing, to not go covert with your fear. See, fear is very seductive. It'll play you like a deck of cards, play you like a guitar. Yeah, fear will play us if we're not careful. And by faith, Miss Nancy welcomed those people. By faith, she shared a radical hospitality. By faith, she talked openly about this struggle. You know, nothing is harder on a church and its leadership that when you have people in the church who are afraid, but they won't talk about it. What they do instead is they go covert. They go underground, and they'll text each other. They'll look for people who they can align with. They'll become demagogues, right? People who fan the flames of other people's fears, and then they want to build a little alliance. But that doesn't sound like the joy that Jesus is talking about. That's not talking about living by faith. That's talking about living by fear. A demagogue is a more modern term. In the Bible, we have a term for it. It's called Pharisaic. You know how they used to meet and conspire against Jesus because they didn't understand him. They didn't necessarily like him. They were threatened by his power. They had a lot of fear. And they always come to him and say, you're not playing by the rules, Jesus. And he'd say, I'm playing by the rules. I'm just not playing by your rules. I'm playing by the rules of the kingdom of God. You know, I started writing a song. Maybe we'll get Nancy to help me with the tune. I started writing a song this summer about those demagogues and Pharisees and people in the church who want to fan the flames of fears rather than strengthen people's faith. And it's kind of a country song. I'm so unfinished with it. I've only got kind of the chorus going. I had to write it out by hand. It's on my phone. It's called Don't Let Your Gossip and Grumbles. You can already it sounds kind of country. It says, don't let your gossip and grumbles drive others away. Don't let your chatter, lead them astray. Bring good words of mercy. They ring out so clear. Like soft rain in summer, they fall sweet on the ears. No gossip and grumbles drive good folks away. Let your kind words for others be the reason they stay. Fear can be insidious in a church. Fear can bring people down. Fear can drive good folks away. Whether people are anxious and they want to draw you in with a text, an email, a phone call, the meeting after the meeting out in the parking lot, we always call that. That can be trouble for folks. So we got to be sure that we're driven not by fear, but by faith. And lest we confuse what I'm talking about when I say faith, I want you to think of faith not as a noun, but as a verb. It's something we do. When Abraham and Sarah, originally Abram and Sarai, followed in faith, they left everyone they knew. They left behind their home, their family. They left behind what was familiar, what was safe. And guess what? They didn't have Facebook Messenger. They didn't have text. They couldn't stay in touch. They were going into a foreign land. And get this, God didn't even tell them where. God sent them on a needs-to-know basis. And at that point, you don't needs to know. He said, come and go into a land that I will show you. That's what it is to travel by faith. It's to get up, it's to go to that land God will show us. It is to trust and to follow, even if we don't see the end. We'll get there, turn around, look back, go, oh, I see the hand of God was active. And we have to be active with our faith. It's not just a feeling, it's a doing. It's a getting up and going. When Joshua led the people to the battle of Jericho, they went to do battle. They got up and they went. They marched around the city of Jericho how many times? 7. If you didn't know that was 7, you need to go to Bible study on Wednesday and Sunday school on Sunday mornings. 7 times. It was an easy guess. Even take a chance. Marched around 7 times. It was very active what they did. Faith is like that gift you get at Christmas. You got to unwrap the package, take it out of the box, and use it. It's like that beautiful new Corvette you might be driving. You can't leave it in the garage all the time. I'm so thankful when I see that car sitting out in the yard, Al. Just don't understand why you haven't tossed me the keys and said, hey, Pastor, take it for a ride. Trust me, I don't need to do that. I don't need to do that. I'll let my fear be the guide on that one, or yours. You can't have a beautiful car and never take it out of the garage. Faith is meant to be used. It's an active sort of thing. About 15 years ago, a guy in my church up in Cleveland, a good, solid, small business owner who understood about hard work and investing and all sorts of the right things. He came to me one day. I don't remember whether we were out at dinner or something, but he said, Pastor, I got a present for you. And he gave me, I wrote this down, it's in my phone. See, I don't have memory anymore, I have external memory. So if I have to go to my phone. What was that called again? He gave me a bottle of wine. And not just any wine, it was a Grand Vin de Chateau Latour, 1978. He gave me this bottle in about, we're on low battery. Must be a long sermon. So he gave me this bottle of wine, and he says he collects wine, and I should start collecting too. It's a good investment. I said, really? I don't know anything about wine. And in my house, if someone brings a bottle of wine, it lasts about as long as the people are there who brought the bottle of wine. So I looked it up online, and you know how much this bottle of wine was worth? At that time, it was worth $500. $500 for a bottle of wine? Come on, it's not even Italian. So I looked up this morning. You know how much that bottle of wine is worth today, about 10, 15 years later? $4,575. Would have been a good investment if I'd saved it. But let me tell you, I had something better out of that bottle of wine. See, for a long time, I thought, wow, I've got this precious wine that he wants me to save, and you have to store it at the right temperature, and you have to, what's the word for it, when you turn the bottle every couple of weeks so the sediment doesn't settle, and any time we moved from an apartment to a home or wherever, coming back here, we had to take such good care of this wine, and all of a sudden I felt like I'm a slave to this wine. It doesn't feel, I don't know what to do this. Well, my best friend, he's a wine dealer, and not like owns a little shop. I mean, he shops out wines for major airlines and shipping companies. Just made his biggest sale the other day. Texted me, he said it was a $28 million deal. He's number 3 wine tester in Canada. He's one of the top 10 in the United States. I called him up one day and I said, hey, this guy gave me this wine. Should I drink it or save it? And he said neither. And I said, what should I do with it? He said, send it to me. He collects wines too. So a couple years ago, just in case you're wanting to do math, 2 years ago, he and I both turned 60. It falls apart after that now. And he was going to be in Florida. And so Beth and I drove down to surprise him and his wife and celebrate our 60th birthdays together. We're a week apart. And I brought the bottle of wine. And on the last night, he made this beautiful meal. He's very culinary, and he had all sorts of his wines. And I brought this bottle of French wine out. And at that time, it was worth about $2,000. And poor Brian, he thought I was giving it to him as a gift for his birthday. I said, no, it's our 60th birthday. Let's drink it. Let's celebrate together. And that's exactly what we did. And once he got over that moment of, Really? We're going to drink this? It was the best bottle of wine I ever had. Not because it was worth whatever. It could have been could have been a $10 bottle of wine to me. But what was great about it is I got to celebrate the joy that I have in my friendships. I got to celebrate the joy of our life together and turning 60 together. I think that's the way it is with faith. God's not asking us to keep our faith under a bushel. God's not asking us to keep it in a cupboard and churn it every couple of weeks and follow all the prescribed behaviors. God's asking us to drink it, to enjoy our faith, to use our faith, and to not let fear become our master. So friends, if you stand before the throne of God, kingdom of heaven, what's God going to say to you? Is he going to say, celibate? I meant celebrate. For me, I can't help but feel that when I get there, and Jesus is at the right hand of the throne of God, Jesus, my Redeemer, I can't help but feel like God's going to have the biggest smile on his face, and he's going to give me a good basketball belly laugh, because he knows that my heart is good, and I've tried my best to live in faith my whole life. And even when I've fallen short, my brother Jesus had it covered. I hope you get the same thing. I hope when that time comes, God's going to greet you with the biggest smile you ever imagined. He's going to say, welcome home. Let's celebrate. Praise be to God.